Welcome to Trench Diaries. This is Stuka Pilot, part 11. It is getting on for July. Our sorties are much more frequent and the planned local offensive in the area north of Jassy is underway. Not with the invented number of tanks and later than the date of the original plan, but nevertheless with fresher troops than we have recently been used to. It is necessary to capture the whole plateau between the Prut and the Tagul Frumos. It is an easier line to hold, and its capture will also deprive the enemy of a favorable springboard for an assault. The whole front line in this sector is on the move, and we succeed in pushing the Soviets back a considerable distance. By stubborn resistance, they manage to hang on to several key points. They are lucky, because local attacks intended to mop up these nests of resistance are never carried out. Some of our assault units, which are thrown in like a fire brigade wherever the fighting is hottest, have to be withdrawn. I fly my 2100th operational sortie in the course of this offensive. My target is a familiar one, the bridge at Skuleni, of vital importance to the supply line of the hard-pressed Soviets. Every time we come back in to attack it from north of Jassy, it is already hidden by a smokescreen, and we can never be sure of not dropping our bombs too close to our own front line. Each time I see the smokescreen, I have to laugh, imagining the faces of the Ivans down below gazing up at our approach. It does not require a linguist to distinguish the one always recurring word, Stuka, Stuka, Stuka. Our days at Husi are numbered, however. After a birthday party in my vineyard in the first half of July, orders arrive for us to move to Zamoshk in the central sector of the Eastern Front. Here the Russians have launched a new large-scale offensive. We arrive at this new operational base flying over the North Carpathians, over Struj and bypassing Lemberg. Zamość is a pretty little town. It makes a good impression. We are quartered in an old Polish barracks on the northern edge of the town. Our airfield itself lies rather far outside of it and consists of stubble fields. The landing strip is narrow and at once causes a very regrettable accident. On his very first landing, Warrant Officer W's aircraft pancakes and the pilot injures himself rather seriously. He's one of my best tank snipers, and it will be a long time before we have him with us again. Here again there is ample work for tank busters, especially as the front lines are not stabilized but fluid. Breakthroughs by tanks are the order of the day. We hold Kovel, but the Soviets have bypassed it and are endeavoring to cross the Bug. It is not long before their spearheads appear in the area northwest of Lemberg, at Ravaruska and Tovazov, and at Kolm to the north. During this phase we have another move, this time to Milek, a small Polish town 60 miles northwest of Krakow. The aim of the Soviet advance is clear. They are trying to reach the Vistula on a comparatively wide front. Our targets are the oncoming masses of men and material now trying to cross the San to the north of Przemysl. The fighter opposition is not to be underestimated, as American fighters now more and more often put in an appearance after flying as escort to four-engined bomber formations. Originally, they come from air bases on the Mediterranean. As we now have reason to perceive, they do not return to base immediately on completion of their mission, but land on Russian territory to refuel. Then one day they come back on another mission and afterwards fly south to their starting base. On one sortie over the San, I run into one such Mustang formation, as I am already coming in to attack. There are nearly 300 of them. I am flying with a formation of 15 bombers without any fighter protection. We are still 23 miles from Yaroslav, our target for today. In order not to endanger the squadron and, above all, its several new crews, I give the order to jettison bombs so that we shall be better able to maneuver in the all too unequally matched air battle. I am reluctant to give this order. Hitherto, we have always attacked the target assigned to us, even in the face of great enemy superiority. This is the first time, it will also be the last until the end of the war. But today I have no choice, so I bring my squadron home without loss, and we are able to make up for our failure to carry out our mission the next day under more favorable conditions. Success justifies my action, for in the evening I hear that a neighboring unit suffered heavy losses from this huge formation of Mustangs. At midday, a few days later, while we are refueling, we are again surprised by an American formation which immediately comes down to attack our aircraft. Our airfield defense is not strong, and our AA gunners, at first taken by surprise, are slow in opening up on the attackers. The Americans had not reckoned with flak, and as it is certainly no part of their program not to return today, they turn away without any material success in search of easier prey. A telephone call from the Air Command. For the first time in this war, the Russians have set foot on German soil and are pushing into East Prussia from the Wilkowiesen area in the direction of Gumbin and Insterburg. I want to move to East Prussia at once. The transfer order arrives, and the following day I am already at Insterburg with my flying personnel. In the heavenly peacefulness of East Prussia, it is quite impossible to imagine that the war has already come so close and that sorties with bombs and anti-tank aircraft have to be flown from this quiet spot. In the town of Insterburg itself, the people have not yet adjusted themselves to the gravity of the situation. The aerodrome is still overcrowded with installations which are useless for such concentrated operational activity. Therefore, it is better to move to Lotsen in the Masurian Lake District, where we are alone on a tiny airfield. Midsummer in the lovely East Prussian country. Is this land to become a battlefield? It is here that we realize that we are fighting for our homes and for our freedom. How much German blood has already drenched this soil in vain? It must not happen again. These are the thoughts which fill our minds as we fly towards our target, north of the Memel or at Schaulen, at Suwalki or Augustovo. And on the way home, the same thoughts torment us. We are now back where we started from in 1941. It was from here that the invasion of the East began. Will the monument at Tannenberg acquire an even greater significance? The emblem of German chivalry is painted on our squadron aircraft. Never has it meant so much to us as now. Stiff fighting in the area around Wilkowiesen, the town itself changes hands time and again. A small German armored unit stands its ground here, supported by us from the first to the last minute of daylight, resisting the incessant onslaught of the Russians for several days. Some of the T-34s take cover behind the corn stacks standing on the harvested fields. We set the stacks on fire with incendiaries so as to uncover the tanks, then we go for them. A broiling summer, we live quite close to the water and often bathe in a half-hour break between sorties, a sheer enjoyment. The effects of the ceaseless activity on the ground and in the air are soon perceptible. The initial fury of the Russian assault has noticeably slackened. Counterattacks are more and more frequent, and so the front can to some extent be stabilized again. But when fighting dies down in one place, it is sure to flare up in another, so it is here. The Soviets are thrusting towards Lithuania, trying to outflank our armies in Estonia and Latvia. Consequently for us, in the air, there is always a job to be done. The Soviets are relatively well informed as to the strength of our defense on the ground and in the air. One sortie again provides Flying Officer Fickel with an occasion to celebrate his birthday. We are on our way to attack enemy concentrations, and the Reds are up to their old trick of using our wavelength. Personally, I cannot at the moment understand what they are jabbering, but it evidently refers to us because the word Stuka keeps on recurring. My linguist colleague and a ground listening post which has an interpreter tell me the story afterwards. This is, more or less, what happened. Stukas approaching from the west, calling all Red Falcons. You are to attack the Stukas immediately. There are about 20. In front, a single Stuka with 2 long bars. It is sure to be Squadron Leader Rudel's squadron, the one that always knocks out our tanks. Calling all Red Falcons and AA batteries. You are to shoot down the Stuka with the long bars. Flight Officer Marquardt gives me a rough translation while we are in the air. Fickel says with a laugh, if they aim at number 1, you can bet they'll hit number 2. He generally flies as my number 2 and therefore speaks from experience. Ahead of us and below us, Ivans with motor vehicles, artillery and other stuff on a road between isolated woods. The heavy flag is putting up a good show, the Red Falcons are already there, air cobras attack us. I give the order to counterattack. A part of the formation dives onto the trucks and lorries, a smaller section onto the AA batteries, all maneuvering frantically. The fighters now think their opportunity has come. Flag clouds hang close to our aircraft. Shortly before he goes into a dive, Flight Officer Fickel gets a direct hit in his wing. He jettisons his bombs and flies off in the direction from which we have come. His aircraft is on fire. We have dropped our bombs and come out of our dive. I gain height to see where Fickel has got to. He makes landing in the middle of a quite unsuitable country, furrowed with ditches and full of potholes, tree stumps and other obstacles. His aircraft skips over 2 ditches like a rampageous he-goat. It is a miracle that he has not pancaked long ago. Now he and his gunner clamber out. The situation is bad. Cavalry, followed by tanks, are already converging on his aircraft from the woods, naturally intent on capturing the crew. The Airacobras are now attacking us furiously from above. I call out, "Someone must land at once. You know I am no longer allowed to." I have a horrible feeling, because I have been expressly forbidden to land and it goes against the grain to consciously disobey orders. We are still banking low above the fallen aircraft. Fickel and Barge down there can surely not imagine that anyone can land safely under the circumstances. The Soviets are gradually closing in and still no one sets about landing. Outmaneuvering the fighters makes full demands of every crew's attention. The decision to land myself in spite of everything is a hard one to make, but as I see it, if I do not act now, my comrades are lost. If it is at all possible for anyone to rescue them, I have the best chance of anyone. To disobey an order is, I know, unforgivable, but the determination to save my comrades is stronger than my sense of duty. I have forgotten everything else, the consequences of my action, everything. I must bring it off. So I give my orders. Number 7. You are to attack cavalry and infantry at low level. Number 8. You are to circle at moderate height to cover Fickel and me. Number 9. You are to stay up and divert fighters from this intended maneuver. If fighters dive, then number 9 is to attack them from above. I fly very low over the scene of the forced landing and select a patch of ground which may serve, with a bit of luck, to land on. Slowly I open the throttle. Now we are over the second ditch. Throttle back, a terrific jolt. For an instant my tail is in the air, then I come to a stop. Fickel and Barge run for their lives. They are quickly alongside. Ivan's bullets have so far not hit anything that matters. Both are in behind. I open the throttle. I am seething with excitement. Can I make it? Will my aircraft become airborne before it hits an obstacle on the ground and is smashed to pieces? Here comes the ditch. I snatch up the aircraft, clear it, and again my wheels lightly bump the ground. Then she stays up. Slowly, the tension eases. The squadron closes up and we get home without loss. Rudel's traveling circus has taken up a pitch of a stubble field near the town of Venden, not far from the Latvian-Estonian frontier. Field Marshal Schörner has been trying his hardest all this time to get my squadron into the sector, with the result that we are now up here on the Courland front. We are barely installed in our cornfield when the inevitable cake arrives with the Field Marshal's compliments. No matter where I turn up in his command, one of these fabulous cakes always appears, usually with a T-34 in sugar icing and the numbers, whatever it is at the time, of thanks I am credited with. The cake is now piped with the figure 320. The general situation up here is as follows. In the Tukum area, we have launched an attack to re-establish the broken communications with the rest on the Eastern Front. It is delivered by the assault group under the command of the distinguished Colonel Count Strachwitz and is successful. The Soviets are, however, making a persistent effort to indent our front on the east of Courland. This sector has long been a thorn in their side. Hitherto, they have been held by the unbounded gallantry of our German soldiers, despite their immense numerical superiority. At this particular moment, this sector is again being subjected to unusually violent pressure. It is to relieve this pressure that Field Marshal Schörner has called for our support. On our very first sorties, we observed that the front lines here are not too fluctuating. The red positions everywhere are well fortified, their camouflage is excellent, their AA batteries well sighted quite close to the front line, and everywhere they are strong. Enemy activity in the air is constant and lively. There are hordes of enemy fighters and very few of our own. The bread we eat here is bitterly earned, no matter in which direction we fly, whether to the east or the south of the pocket. In several sorties, we were successful in destroying a big motorized convoy, including escorting tanks, which had reached the gates of Dorpat, so that this breakthrough was checked and could be finally sealed off by the army. Where do they get these endless masses of men and material from? It is positively uncanny. The lorries we have shot up are mostly of American origin. Only occasionally among the tanks have we come across small groups of Shermans. The Russians do not even need these American tanks, for their own are better adapted to the fighting conditions in Russia and their production is fabulous. These enormous quantities of material bewilder and often depress us. We often encounter American types of aircraft, especially Airacobras, King Cobras and Bostons. The Americans are aiding their ally tremendously with motor vehicles, but also particularly in the air. Is it in their own interest to give the Russians so much help? We often argue this question. One morning at 2:30, Flight Officer Weisbach, my intelligence operations officer, wakes me. Field Marshal Schörner wishes to speak to me urgently. For a long time I have had my telephone disconnected during the night, as I have to take off early and must have a good night's rest. So my intelligence operations officer, who has not to fly the next morning, receives all night calls, but for the Field Marshal I am always there. He does not beat about the bush, that is not his way. Can we take off at once? 40 tanks with motorized infantry have broken through. Our units on the front line have let themselves be overrun and want to close the gap again this evening, but this Russian force has driven a deep wedge into our positions and must be attacked to stop them expanding the breakthrough area. If they can do that, they may cause the greatest damage to our supply lines in the back army zone. It is the same old story. I've been in Schörner's sector too often to be surprised. Our brothers in arms on the front line lie down and let the tanks walk over them and expect us to pull the chestnuts out of the fire. They leave us to deal with the enemy forces in their rear, hoping to be able to seal up the gap the same evening or in a couple of days, thus rendering the encircled enemy harmless. Here in Kurland, this is especially important because any major penetration may lead to the collapse of the entire front. After a quick consideration, I tell the Field Marshal, it is still pitch dark and a sortie now would have no chance of success, for I must have daylight for low-level attacks on tanks and lorries. I promise to take off at dawn with my 3 squadron and the anti-tank flight for the map square you have given me. Then I will call you immediately and let you know how things look. According to what he has told me, the Reds have infiltrated westward into a lake district and are at the moment, with their armored spearhead, on a road running between 2 lakes. In the meantime, I instruct Flight Officer Weisbach to collect meteorological reports from every possible source by telephone and to have us wakened accordingly so that, taking off in the twilight, we can be over the target at break of day. A brief telephone call to the skippers of the flights, and now everything goes automatically. What you have practiced 100 times you can do in your sleep. The cook knows exactly when to put on the coffee, the senior fitter knows to a second when to parade the ground staff to get the aircraft ready. All that is necessary is a short message to the flights. Take off for first sortie 0530 hours. In the early morning, a high fog hangs over the airfield at about 150 feet. In view of the urgency of our mission and hoping that it will be better in the target area, we take off. We head southeast at low level. Fortunately, the country is as flat as a board, otherwise flying would be impossible. Visibility is hardly more than about 1200 feet, especially as it is none yet fully light. We have flown for something like half an hour when the fog cover drops to about ground level because we are nearing the lake district. Now I give the order to change formation, owing to the difficulty of flying at 150 to 200 feet. For safety, we fly abreast in line. I can no longer make out the shapes of my outside aircraft. They are moving in the ground mist and are swallowed up from time to time in the fog bank higher up. There is no possibility of delivering a successful attack in these weather conditions. If we were to drop our bombs, it would have to be from so low an altitude that the splinters would damage our aircraft with resultant losses, which could serve no useful purpose, so that is out. Merely to have been in the target area will not help anyone today. I am glad when the last of us has landed safely. I inform the Field Marshal and he tells me that he has received the same meteorological reports from the front line. At last, towards 9 o'clock, the layer of fog above the airfield shreds out a little and lifts to 1,200 feet. I take off with the anti-tank flight, accompanied by the 7th to deal with bombing targets. On the fringe of the fog bank, we head southeast again, but the further we fly in this direction, the lower the cloud base sinks again. Soon, we are down once more at 150 feet. Visibility is fantastically bad. There are hardly any landmarks, and so I fly by compass. The lake district begins, the weather remains foul. I do not approach the point the field marshal has given me as the location of the spearhead directly from the northeast, but making a slight detour westward, I fly past it, so that when I turn round to make the attack, I shall be heading straight for home, a very necessary precaution in this weather. If the enemy is as strong as he has been described, he's likely to have a corresponding AA strength. There is no question of coming in warily under cover of hills or trees, because my approach is over water. Consequently, the ground defense must be a consideration in choosing my tactics. To keep out of sight by popping in and out of the clouds is not advisable for a whole formation because of the danger of collision so close to the ground, though it is possible for individual aircraft. Quite apart from this consideration, the pilots would then have to give their whole attention to their flying and would be unable to concentrate sufficiently on their objective. We fly in low over the water from the south. It is dark and murky. I cannot distinguish anything more than 2,000 to 2,500 feet ahead. Now I see straight in the line of my flight a black moving mass. The road, tanks, vehicles, Russians. I at once yell, "Attack!" Already at almost point-blank range, the defense loses off a concentrated fire from in front of me, twin and quadruple flag machine guns revealing everything with a livid brightness in this foggy flight. I am flying at 90 feet and have bumped right into the middle of this hornet's nest. Shall I get out of it? The others have fanned out on either side of me and are not so much the focus of the defense. I twist and turn in the craziest defensive maneuvers to avoid being hit. I shoot without taking aim, for to balance my aircraft for a second in order to hit a definite target means being shot down for certain. Now I climb a little as I reach the vehicles and tanks and soar over them. I feel I am sitting on eggs and waiting for the smash. This is bound to end badly. My head is as hot as the metal screaming past me. A few seconds later, a telltale hammering. Garderman yells, "Engine on fire!" A hit in the engine. I see that the engine is laboring with only a fraction of its capacity. Flames lick the cockpit. "Ernst, we are bailing out. I'll gain altitude a little and fly on for as far as we can to get out of the way of the Russians. I saw some of our own chaps not too far from here." I try to climb. I have no idea of my altitude. A dark patch of oil has spread over the inside and the outside of the windows. I can no longer see a thing and throw up the hood of the cockpit so as to be able to see, but that is no good either. The flames outside screen my vision. "Ernst, we must bail out now." The engine stutters and rattles, stops, stutters again, stops and stutters. Our kite will be our crematorium on this meadow. We must bail out now. "We can't," yells Garderman. "We are only flying at 90 feet. He can see from the back. He too has thrown up the hood. It snaps the intercommunications cord in two. Now we can no longer speak to each other. His last words are, "We are over a forest." I pull the stick for all I am worth, but the aircraft refuses to climb. I know from Garderman that we are flying too low to bail out. Can we crash land the Ju-87? Perhaps it is still possible even if I can see nothing. For that the engine must keep running, if only feebly. It may come off, provided the terrain is in any way suitable. I close the throttle slowly. As I feel the aircraft sink, I glance out sideways. I see the ground rushing by. We could only be at 20 feet at most. I brace myself against the shock. Suddenly we touch and I cut the ignition. We crash. The motor stops. It must be the end of us. Then comes a grinding crash and I know no more. I am aware of the stillness around me, therefore I am still alive. I try to reconstruct. I am lying on the ground. I want to get up, but I cannot. I am pinned down. My leg and my head hurt me. Then it occurs to me that Garderman must be somewhere. I call out, "Ernst, where are you? I can't get out." Wait, I'm here. Perhaps we can do it. Are you badly hurt?" It takes some time before he hobbles up and tries to get me through the wreckage. Now I understand what is causing me so much pain. A long piece of metal from the tail of the aircraft is skewering the lower part of my thigh, and the whole of the tail is on top of me so that I cannot move. I can thank my stars that nothing is burning near me. Where can the burning parts have got to, however? First, Garderman pulls the piece of metal out of my leg, then he extricates me from the other parts of the aircraft which are crushing me. It requires all his strength to heave them off. I ask, "Do you think the Russians are already here?" Hard to say. We are surrounded by scrub and forest. Once I am up on my feet, I take stock of this scene of wreckage. About 100 yards away lies the engine, burning. 50 or 60 yards to one side the wings, one of them also smoldering. Straight in front of me, a good distance away, lies a part of the fuselage with the rear gunner's seat in which Gardaman was stuck. That is why his voice came from in front of me when I called out. Normally it should have come from the other side because he sits behind me. We bandage our wounds and try to explain our luck in being still alive and relatively safe, for without a proper dressing I cannot contemplate escape as I am losing a lot of blood. Our 90 feet fall seems to have happened in the following stage. The main force of our impact was broken by the trees on the edge of the forest, then the aircraft was flung onto a patch of sandy soil where it smashed up and the different parts flew asunder as already described. We had both unstrapped our safety belts and were ready to bail out. I still cannot understand why I did not hit my head against the instrument panel. I was lying a long way behind the remains of my pilot seat. I must therefore have been flung there with the tail. Yes, man must be born lucky. There is a sudden rustling in the bushes. Somebody is pushing his way through the undergrowth. We look in the direction of the sound with bated breath. Then we heave a sigh of relief. We recognize German soldiers. They've heard the crash from the road after hearing the noise of gunfire in the distance and shortly afterwards seeing a German aircraft on fire. They urge us to hurry. There are no more of our chaps behind us, only masses of Ivans. One of them adds with a grin, but I guess you noticed the Ivans yourselves, and throws a significant glance at the smoldering wreckage of our aircraft. We climb into the truck they have with them and off we go, hell for leather, heading northwest. We are back with the squadron early that afternoon. No one had seen us crash as everybody had had his hands full at the time. The first 4 hours of my absence have not occasionally much concern, as I often have to bring down a gallant Ju-87 onto its belly somewhere near the front line as a result of enemy action and then report my whereabouts by telephone. If more than 4 hours elapse, however, faces darken and faith in my proverbial and infallible guardian angel sinks. I ring up the field marshal. He, more than anyone, rejoices with me that I have got back again and, needless to say, gives notice that yet another birthday cake will be on its way over tonight. The sky is now a brilliant blue, the last vestiges of the blanket of fog are dissipating. I report to the field marshal that we are about to take off again, I myself being particularly incensed against our Soviet friends. They, or I, that is the rule of war. It wasn't me this time, logically, therefore it must now be them. The wing has sent over their medical officer in a Fieseler-Storch. He puts a fresh dressing on my wounds and declares that I have a concussion. Gardaman has broken 3 ribs. I cannot say that I feel exactly in the pink, but my determination to fly outweighs every other consideration. I brief the crews, assigning them their targets. We shall attack the flag with all our bomber aircraft, and when it has been neutralized, destroy tanks and vehicles in low-level attacks. Quickly, my squadron is airborne and heading southeast. The Lake District comes into view. We are flying at 6,600 feet. We make our approach from the southwest so that we can appear out of the sun. The AA gunners will have difficulty in distinguishing us, and we shall be better able to pick out their guns if they are glittering in the sunshine. There they are, too, still on the same spot as before. Apparently, they do not intend to make any further advance until reinforcements have arrived. We bank around our objective, baiting the flag to open up on us. The AA guns are partly mounted on lorries, the rest have made themselves emplacements in a circle round their vehicles. As soon as the fireworks have started, I briefly recapitulate the targets and then follows the order to attack, beginning with the flag. I find this a satisfaction because I owe it to them that a few hours ago my life once again hung by a silken thread. We anti-tank aircraft fly through the bomb smoke and spurting clouds of dust and attack the T-34s. One has to keep a sharper lookout not to fly into the exploding bombs. The flag is soon silenced. One tank after another blows up, trucks catch fire. They will never reach Germany. This spearhead has certainly lost its impetus. We return home with the feeling that we have done all that lies within our power. In the night, the field marshal rings up again to tell me that our comrades on the ground have counterattacked successfully, the breakthrough has been sealed off and the encircled enemy mopped up. He thanks us in the names of his command for our support. I shall pass on his message to the squadron first thing tomorrow. It is always our highest reward to hear from our brothers in arms on the ground that our cooperation was indispensable and made their own success a possibility. Alarming reports reach us in Latvia that the Soviets are driving into Romania. We are transferred overnight to Busau, a town north of Bucharest, our route being East Prussia, Krakow, Debrecen, a wonderful flight across Eastern Europe in brilliant Indian summer sunshine. The flight is made by the 3rd Squadron with the wing staff, the 2nd is in the Warsaw zone, and one already in Romania. At Debrecen, a lot of time is wasted refueling, so it becomes too late to take off for Romania before dark. We have to cross the Carpathians, and I have no intention of losing a crew on a transfer flight. So we stay the night at Debrecen and, at my suggestion, go for an evening bath. There are marvelous baths in the town supplied by natural warm medicinal springs. We find women of all ages sitting stolidly on the baths with handbags, books, needlework or their lapdogs to the delight and amazement of my companions. This squatting in the baths with the interminable female gossip, which is part of the routine, is their daily occupation. It is a strange spectacle for old Russian campaigners to see such a collection of scantily clad femininity. The next morning we take off for Klausenburg, a lovely old town where the Transylvanian Germans settled centuries ago. That is why the natives here speak German. We make only a short stop here to refuel, for we are in a hurry. At the same time, an American reconnaissance plane appears at about 20,000 feet, which means that a visit from American bomber formations may be expected before very long. The flight over the Carpathians to Busau is grand, as is every flight above beautiful mountain scenery in perfect weather. The town now comes into view ahead of us. It used to be an unimportant landing stage on the way up to the front, which ran a long way to the north of it. It is now an operational base. What has happened to the stable front line Yassi Targul Frumos and to Husi? The aerodrome lies in the open country and offers no possibilities of camouflage for our aircraft, and Ploesti, the oil center of Romania, which is quite close, is being attacked incessantly by American bombers with very strong fighter protection. The fighters can afterwards turn their attention to us in as far as we may be thought worth a plastering. The number of American fighters sent up to escort a single bomber formation on every sortie here is greater than the total German fighter strength on the whole front. As I come into land, I see the roads leading to the aerodrome are packed with endless streams of Romanian military trekking southward. In places, convoys are halted by traffic jams. Heavy artillery of all calibers are among them, but there are no German units here. I am witnessing the last act of tragedy. Whole sectors were held by Romanian units which has ceased to offer any resistance whatever and are now in full retreat. The Soviets are at their heels. Where the front line ran, the German soldier fights and stands his ground and will therefore be cut off and taken prisoner. He does not think it possible that our Romanian allies will let the Russians invade Romania without a fight and expose their people to this gruesome fate. He just does not believe it. After landing, our aircraft are immediately got ready for operations while I report to my old wing. They are glad to have us back with them. They think we are going to have our hands full. The Russian tanks are already up to Foscari, their objective being the quick capture of Bucharest and Ploesti. Further north, German units are still putting up a fight in the Southern Army Group. In the meantime, our aircraft have been got ready and we take off at once, flying high and following the main road north to Foscari. 6 miles south of this town we observe gigantic clouds of dust. If that is not already the tanks, it is. We attack, they leave the road and scatter in the fields, but that doesn't save them. We shoot up some of them, then go back for fresh ammunition and continue our engagement with the same column. Wherever you look, masses of men and material, all Russian, mostly Mongolians. Are their reserves of manpower so inexhaustible? We get fresh practical evidence that the productive capacity of the USSR has been greatly underestimated by everybody and that no one knows the true facts. The masses of tanks, time and again unimaginable in their number, are the most convincing proof of all of this. Many motor vehicles are also of American origin. One sortie follows hard upon one another from dawn till dusk, as during all these years. Well, what can I say? Our man here has crashed again and again, almost died, but he absolutely doesn't care and shortly after is back in the air with a concussion to boot. Incredible. Equally incredible is his description of the American superiority, where they, in a single strategic bombing mission, field more airplanes than are available to the Luftwaffe on the entire Eastern Front. This must have been quite demoralizing for some of the men. One other thing I'd like to talk about is the so-called Tannenberg Memorial that our author mentions once at the beginning. The Tannenberg Memorial was a grand monument built in East Prussia to commemorate the German victory over Russian forces in the 1914 Battle of Tannenberg, which was a decisive victory for the German forces. Constructed between 1924 and 1927, the memorial was designed as an imposing stone structure consisting of 8 massive towers arranged in an octagonal layout evoking medieval fortifications. The design, created by architects Johannes and Walter Krüger, featured high stone walls and courtyards intended to inspire awe and reverence. Each tower housed commemorative plaques and inscriptions honoring fallen soldiers, while the central courtyard served as a ceremonial space for military gatherings and state functions. The site served as both a war memorial and a nationalistic symbol deeply tied to German military pride. In 1934, it became the burial site of German President and World War I General Paul von Hindenburg, one of the commanders at Tannenberg. A grand state funeral was held, attended by high-ranking military officials and Nazi leaders, further elevating the site's significance. Under Nazi rule, the memorial was transformed into a central location for militaristic propaganda, hosting elaborate annual ceremonies, including commemorations for fallen soldiers and political rallies. The site became a stage for Hitler's speeches, reinforcing the regime's narrative of strength and historical destiny. Architectural modifications were made to amplify its grandeur, including additional sculptures and banners, solidifying its role as a tool of nationalist sentiment. However, as World War II neared its end, the German military evacuated Hindenburg's remains in 1945 to prevent their capture by advancing Soviet forces. Shortly thereafter, retreating German troops demolished parts of the structure to prevent its use by the Soviets. After the war, the remnants of the memorial were dismantled by the communist Polish authorities, as the territory had become part of Poland. Today, very little remains of the once magnificent structure, though traces of its foundations can still be found at the site. I've put up some pictures to show you how impressive this monument was, but like with most World War II monuments, it's all but gone today. So, that's it for today's episode. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for watching, and I will see you again next time. Cheers.